All right, so my name is Eileen Spillane, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm currently, for the next 5 days or so, in Wyoming on the unceded land of Shoshone and Crow and Blackfoot tribes, heading my way back to the Bay Area by the end of the week. And I'm filling in for Eugene Cash tonight. So I'll just ring the bell. We'll have a 30-minute sit, and then we'll have some time for announcements. So just allowing the body to settle into a posture that feels alert and relaxed. Feeling the point of contact on your cushion or your chair or the floor. Before changing anything, just notice how the breath is in the body. Noticing how the mind is in the moment. Allowing the events of the day to be behind you. Just intending the mind towards being present for the next 30 minutes or so. Might do a gentle scan of the body. Just notice any tension arising in the body, in the shoulders, allowing the jaw to soften, allowing the belly to be soft. Taking a few intentional breaths, releasing anything that's not needed on the exhale. Finding a place to rest in the body and the breath. As the mind wanders, just know you can rest in coming back again, starting over, coming back to the body, coming back to the breath, without judgment, just friendliness and kindness towards yourself. And just noticing in this moment, where is your attention? What are you aware of in this moment? What are you aware of in this moment? If you're drifting, just find your way back to the breath or the body, or an anchor that supports you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Eileen Spillane, and this is the Sunday night San Francisco Insight group. And I'm filling in tonight for Eugene Cash. And I'll hand it over to you, Nina, for announcements.
Thank you so much, Eileen, and thank you, Sangha. I'm gonna put on my glasses so I can see you. Hello, so my name is Nina, and I'm one of the board members here, and I'm gonna make a couple of announcements. But first I wanna just thank you for that sit, Eileen. That was really helpful. I was anxious today, and I wanted to thank you, the Sangha, because I could actually feel the support of Sangha while I was sitting. So, you know, it means something to be here all together, at least to me. And I wanted to thank you for being in the field with me together. So a couple announcements. Next week, we have a special event. Pam Weiss is going to be interviewing Kyra Jewel Lingo. And it should be a really great event. I just heard her interviewed on 10% Happier. I don't know if any of you listened to that podcast. And she has a new book, which I actually can't remember the name of. Do you remember, Eileen?
We were made for these times.
Okay. So that's next week. And then also to remind you that we as a board have reinstated, or we want to highlight again, something that we put into practice a couple years ago called the Caring Committee. And this is a place for Sangha members. It's a Google group that you can join. And then if you have needs for support, you can list those. And then if folks want to offer their support, they can do that. And there's a whole kind of system in place how to do that. So I will put that information in the chat right now. And it's in our weekly newsletter if you want to check it out. And then we always like to take a moment here to say something about Dharma, which is the Pali word for generosity. And I'm wondering if there's somebody in the group tonight who would like to say a few short words, maybe a minute or less, 2 minutes maybe max, about Dharma, how it is in practice here at San Francisco Insight, or what it means, what your experience has been with it, what it means to you. Okay, I see White Tiger Schools. Thank you. Please unmute yourself.
We are Stephanie and Virgil Day, and White Tiger Schools is our daughter's Kung Fu school. So sometimes she has to hold Zoom meetings at our house, and so she puts that title on. Dana, of course, is the word for generosity in Pali, and it is the principle of giving and sharing from our hearts. And Nina, what you said about the gratitude of the group being together this evening and helping you deal with some anxiety, I think of gratitude and generosity as two sides of the same coin. When we feel gratitude, it opens our hearts and we want to be generous. And I always think of what Joseph Goldstein once said, or maybe it was Jack Kornfield, I don't remember which, but if you ever are struck with the desire to give, do it. So I think that's how I feel about generosity. And I like the idea that it springs from a feeling of gratitude. So in order to support this whole community, of San Francisco Insight is delighted to be the recipient of anyone's desire to give.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful words and giving your voice to the Sangha. Giving and receiving from the heart. I love it. Okay, so back to you, Eileen.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both, Nina and Stephanie. I really appreciate you chiming in, because it's always so nice to hear different reflections of Dharma from people other than the board, because we know you understand it, and some people are shy getting on the mic or whatever, the unmuting Zoom. And yeah, it's actually a generous act, just unmuting and sharing your thoughts. So really deep appreciation there, Stephanie. And I'm touched by Kyra's title, which will be meeting her next week. We were made for these times, because these times sometimes are difficult. And just today, I imagine many of you are aware of the shooting in Sacramento, and 6 people have died, and very close to San Francisco, and 12 more injured. And there's all the joys and all the suffering in the world, and sometimes it feels heavier than others. But where do we find our place of refuge in difficult times? Where do we find a place to rest in difficult times? And what you're sharing there, both Nina and Stephanie, in the reflection of the generosity of coming together, is Sangha is one of those places for us to find a place to rest in difficulty. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. But part of that is also sharing our voices and unmuting and putting your thoughts in, because we all learn from each other. So it's really beautiful to hear the sharing. So I just want you to sort of reflect on what kind of difficulties you've experienced in the last 3 years or so, whether it's recent difficulty or something in the world, or something in your personal life. Something could be the war in Ukraine that's touching you, or wars like elsewhere in the world, in Eritrea or Myanmar, nuclear threat, or a threat to our democracy in ways that is showing up for LGBT communities, or oppression of women's bodies in Congress. Or it could show up as climate change and the closeness of fires in our lives, and how that impacts our air quality as we approach, looking at the summer, how that's going to impact us. You might even think back to, the George Floyd murder, how that impacted you, or the beginning of COVID in March of 2020, when we really had no idea what was going to change our life. I personally had plans that I was like, I guess we should cancel. We didn't really know what we were going to be in for the next few years. But what was your reaction to this unsettling in the difficulty of this ungrounded kind of news? And that news could come also in a personal way. It could come, in a health diagnosis. It could come with COVID for the change in work for many people, or finances, Could be the death of a loved one or an illness, change in your home. You know, how did you meet this difficulty when you're met with this big stressor? And where did you find a place to find comfort? Where did you find a place to find refuge? Which is what we'll be talking about here. You know, and sometimes the news or the events can just be so overwhelming that we default to numbing out in whatever way that is for you. And so just notice if that's your reaction, and create a space of acceptance and allowing as you reflect on your own history here with whatever is resonating for you. Because we want to be in a place of non-judgment about letting us be who we are in how we're finding capacity to be with difficulty. And, you know, sometimes numbing out and dissociating is a defense mechanism because it feels just way too much that we need to protect or defend against something because it feels too much. And sometimes our refuge is numbing out with drugs or alcohol or social media or doom scrolling. Sometimes we exercise a lot or get out into nature, or we sit. Depends on what serves us. So just thinking about reflecting on your own place of refuge. Is it skillful? Is it a skillful refuge, or is it unskillful? And again, like not with a judgmental mind here, just with a sense of kindness and openness to allow just a sense of curiosity and exploration here. Is where you go habitually when the world feels unsafe or the floor has kind of been ruffled under your feet? Do you go to a place that increases suffering for yourself and others, or does it decrease suffering for yourself and others? What is your habitual response? So many times it's unconscious. You just maybe do online shopping or comfort eating, and so it's okay just to sort of acknowledge where you go and does it work for you. And so there's a quote in the Dhammapada that says, if you don't like pain, seek the refuges, which I really love, because what sometimes is a false refuge, we don't have that when we seek the refuges of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Those are more like a true refuge, a place to rest that we always have. You know, it's not conditional. It's always with us, regardless of where we are or whatever the circumstances may be. And so, you know, reflecting just now, just pausing for a moment and just think about that. Do I take refuge in the Buddha? Do I take refuge in the Dharma and the teachings? Do I take refuge in the Sangha? And just what resonates the most for you right now? Just knowing who you are. And for the Buddha, we all have this Buddha quality within ourselves. And, you know, it may seem like a lofty goal to take refuge in the Buddha within yourself. But the Buddha was a human being. He had a body, and, you know, he walked in this body and awakened in his body through the senses. And we have that ability too. And the Buddha didn't always teach everything he knew. There were times when he was asked questions and he didn't answer them all. And he wouldn't have taught the possibility of awakening for us if he didn't think it was possible for us to be liberated, to find a path of freedom. So we can take refuge with the Buddha within ourselves, the qualities of the heart, mind. And there's moments when we have the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. That's the Buddha quality within ourselves that's being awakened, that we can find a place of rest, of refuge there, for the wisdom within ourselves. So training the mind to be Buddha-like and live in a skillful way. And even simply just reflecting on where you go for your refuge, whether it's skillful or unskillful, that's a reflection of, oh, how can I be with my Buddha quality within myself, in my refuge? You know, acknowledging that we have the seeds of enlightenment within ourselves for freedom. And then there's also the taking refuge in the Dharma, in the teaching, where we can seek and find safety in the truth of the way things really are, regardless of what's happening in the moment, regardless if we don't like it, if we want things to be different than they are, if we have that ability to be present and open up to really seeing the truth. Can I be okay? I don't like this in this moment. I want it to be different than it is, but it's not. So can I be okay with this in this moment? Can I create space for this to be here too? You know, and I remember being on retreat with Eugene, and you know, there's always that one question someone will ask at the end of the retreat, like, how do I fit the meditation? You know, I've been meditating for hours and hours all day. Now I'm going to go back to my life. How do I squeeze my meditation into my life? And it's his answer, which I'm sure I heard like 10 times before and it never registered, but he said, immerse your life in the Dharma. And that's just such a beautiful teaching for me. That's one of those Dharma teachings that really has resonated for me. And it's carried out. I have immersed my life in the Dharma, and it has worked for me. There's nothing left out of the Dharma. You know, when we reflect on that, you know, in the way we meet people and be present internally and externally, or, you know, when we're out in nature or making love or going to the bathroom, you know, nothing is left out. Everything is the Dharma. You know, if we choose to open up to that, if we choose to take that practice on, and seeing the wisdom of dukkha, anicca, and anatta, and making that alive in our practice, allowing the Dharma teachings to be present. And then, you know, what we do matters. You know, our actions of body, speech, and mind, they all have consequences. And how we allow those teachings to come forth in action, both on the cushion and off the cushion, matters. You know, whether we take on a practice of loving kindness or steady practice of meditation, or we bring our meditation into action, you know, in socially engaged Buddhist ways, whether that's showing up at a march or making phone calls for voter suppression, you know, investigating our biases, simply bearing witness to another's suffering without the need to fix, you know, allowing the Dharma to unfold and express in our own way. You know, we're all coming from different backgrounds, and allowing the Dharma to come through with our expression. And for me, one of the big teachings has been anicca, you know, really taking on the sense of change and impermanence, because it's constant. It's just constant change, whether we like it or not. You know, I saw a quote that did a twist on Mary Oliver's line of what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And they changed it up and they said, what will you do with your one wild and precious window before the next COVID variant arises? Which it feels like that, you know, it's like, oh, we maybe we have a window here. Maybe do I go and take a vacation somewhere, or, you know, go to dinner or go to a wedding? You know, so how do you live with that? How do you live with constant change of mask on, mask off? Or, you know, the little losses that we experience and the big losses that we experience. And so for me, you know, what's mostly so impressive is with the Dharma, it just starts working on you. You know, it just sneaks up on you, you know, when you've been practicing for a while and you find yourself in a crisis, and maybe it's a diagnosis or a loss or an accident. But for me, I was in a pretty serious accident about 5 years ago. And I took a step in the Caribbean on a hike, and I free fell about 30 feet because of erosion. And I broke 18 bones in that one fall. And fortunately, I was not alone, but my friend had to leave to go get help. So he left me for about 2 hours. And so I was alone in the forest. And you know, the practice just showed up. And suddenly my hand was on my heart, and I was deep in self-metta. And there was no resistance. You know, objectively, it would be a circumstance I wouldn't want to be in, but there was really no place of get me out of here. It was really like, okay, this is the circumstance. How can I meet it? And metta arose. It wasn't like I thought, oh, metta would be a good idea. It was just like the practice was there. And that is because it's been cultivated. That soil has been cultivated over and over because I've been steeped in the Dharma, like many of you. And I imagine there's been circumstances for you where you've been surprised or thrown off by circumstances that were challenging, and the Dharma showed up because you have a steady practice. And there's a quote that Terry Tempest Williams, she wrote this book called Refuge. And the quote goes, "My refuge exists in my capacity to love. If I can learn to love death, then I can begin to find refuge in change." I just love that quote. It's so powerful. And there's so many opportunities because we're full of opportunities to practice with change. And yeah, I'm curious when you think of the Dharma, when you think of all the teachings, there's a lot of experience here in this Zoom room. What Dharma teaching comes forth for you as a place for you to rest in it when you're met with difficulty? Whether it's a sutta or a teaching you've heard from a teacher of yours. You know, one of the teachings that always puts a smile on my face is when Ananda goes to the Buddha and says, you know, spiritual friends, half of the holy life, right? And he says, of course not. I'm improving a little bit here. Of course not, Ananda. It's the whole of the holy life. And I just love that teaching because that just is a reflection of the third refuge of Sangha, of our spiritual friendship. And, you know, that's evidenced here just by all of us showing up and practicing together, waking up in a conscious community, place that we can show up and be ourselves, practice together in the truth of the way things are. And, you know, this could be your Sangha, You might have multiple Dharma groups that you're a participant of, or you've got other communities that are not necessarily your Buddhist sanghas. There's also affinity groups, coming together with other like-minded people where you don't need to explain yourself, can find refuge. I've talked to my BIPOC friends who describe just tremendous ease and belonging on going on POC retreats where they don't need to anticipate microaggressions or feeling othered, or for white people waking up, doing the Investigating White Identity program right now with Maggie and Paul and Bhavani. And, for me, another affinity group is just being with other healthcare workers, because I work as a nurse. And there's a way that I can just share without needing to filter and be present to listen to the difficulty. I have friends that were working in New York City in the ICU during March of 2020 when things were really slamming. And, they weren't able to really share fully when they went home to their partners. It was just too much. So to be able to bear witness in a community that you understand and that I facilitate groups around death and dying, and participants waking up around another topic that can be hard to talk about, and find support and encouragement to have these conversations with their family or loved ones. And, it's not always a topic that everyone says, oh, but tell me more. I want to hear about that. So that's another place of community and Sangha where we can wake up together. And it doesn't mean that it's not bumpy at times. We interact and we learn from each other, and, we're rewarded. We're rewarded with that growth. And so just thinking about how you show up in Sangha, like is Sangha a place of refuge for you? And what about it is a place of refuge? And how do you cultivate that in your life? And how do you provide refuge for others? Just really reflecting on all of the places that you find refuge, of whether they're skillful or unskillful, whether it's in the Buddha or the Dharma or the Sangha. Just noticing how that feels in the body, and if there's a sense of ease and release, that it feels like, oh, I can actually rest in this. This is a place of refuge. Or if it feels like, oh no, this is not a true place that I'm relaxing in. It's actually creating a little bit more tension here. So maybe I'll end there for a little bit and we can chat. And I'd love to hear like completely non-judgmentally, all of the skillful or unskillful ways that you meet challenges or crisis. And of all those three of the true refuges of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, what really speaks clearly to you? So you're welcome to raise your hand at the bottom of your Zoom under reactions, or for some reason I must have just upgraded. I have a raise hand thing, which I've never had before at the bottom. Or you can just wave if that's too challenging for you. Yeah, go ahead there, Michelle. Go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. I really, really appreciated how you broke them all down, because sometimes when I'm quizzed on what do they mean, I can get a little stuck. And based on what you shared, I really feel for me, I'm definitely immersed in Sangha. I mean, I have, and especially in the beginning of COVID, I reached out to groups that I hadn't been affiliated with in a long time, saying, "This is what I need," and like, let's get some Zooms together. And it's been really, really nourishing. And then also I can see the teachings. I mean, what many of you don't know is that before Eileen left, she offered up some of her huge book library to share. And so I'm loving the teachings. And so what I really need to, where I want to look at is, where do I find the Buddha within? I think that I'm not focused on that at all. It's maybe a byproduct. It comes up now and then. But the way you said it, like, where is, where there is no greed, hatred, or delusion, and those other things help. But, definitely, Netflix has been a huge refuge. And that doesn't, because depending on what I'm ingesting, that doesn't help me get rid of greed, delusion, or hatred. In fact, it often can breed it. So it's a really good reminder. Huge gratitude.
Oh, beautifully said. Yeah. And it can be, it can be really wise to reflect. I mean, and we all can have our unskillful refuges, right? I mean, if you've had a hard day and you want to veg out to Netflix, but be aware of, how do I feel at the end of watching Ozark? Like, okay, maybe that was not so wise. I'm like filled with murderous, bloody, craziness now, so noticing how that impacts on us. And you might also find some beautiful story on Netflix that suddenly your heart is really open. And so just to take in and to reflect it. But I agree, Michelle, for me, the Buddha, taking refuge in the Buddha, it came last. I think the Sangha is just so accessible, and the teachings are accessible, and it feels very lofty to access. Oh, okay, I've got the Buddha within me. And there's there was a story, I won't know exactly what country or who was involved, but they had hidden the golden Buddha with mud. And, eventually they polished it off. And so they discovered this beautiful golden Buddha. And it's kind of like us. We've got a lot of layers on top of our golden Buddha within ourselves. So, when we take on that practice to polish it and to recognize, oh yeah, I have this within me. And look at this act of generosity I just did. That's the Buddha qualities coming forth here. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Who else? Go ahead there, Andrew, unmute.
You, Eileen, and everybody. I feel a little bit less qualified to talk, but I know that's silly and it's my own trip because I don't have good practice. I spend more time thinking about having the practice than having the practice. So, but I've been working really hard on resisting my unskillful refuges and trying to find new ones or cultivate other ones, because I've had a lot of health issues, nothing life-threatening, but it's kind of daunting, and it's very affected by stress. So I've been trying to drastically cut down on my news intake and my Zoom scrolling and my addictive compulsive kind of stuff like stock market checking and and replacing it. So for me, my healthier refuges are cooking, and I'm using podcasts more for media, and trying to avoid straight ahead news podcasts. I rejoined Audible because I have trouble with my attention span with just reading in the traditional way. So Audible is like, it's a good refuge for me. So yeah, I need to, just like in the sitting, teachers say, never mind, start again, just go back to the breath. I need to do that in the big picture too, because I get really down on myself when I feel like it's really hard to start meditating again, because I tell myself this. I tell myself that I've regressed so much, or that my anxiety is so high, or it's so hard to start again. So it's not just starting again during the meditation, starting again, looking at following the breath, but starting again as far as doing a sitting if I haven't done one in 2 weeks or 2 months.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Andrew, first of all, thank you so much for your honesty and your vulnerability in sharing. It's really beautiful. And I would just say it is difficult to establish a practice, especially when there's anxiety. And so, if you have these skillful qualities that you're taking on, sort of replacing your doom scrolling with cooking or podcasting, is to sort of make that your mindfulness practice when you're cooking, really feeling the vegetables, or feeling the heat when you're cooking, feeling the knife when you're cutting the vegetables, making that your practice, and just playing with that for a little while, and noticing when you are taking in the podcasts and the Audible books, what is the content of it? Is it contracting you, or is it expanding you? What are the qualities of the heart in the materials that you're taking in? And you can start. It is hard. It's wonderful that you came tonight. So that's like, let's celebrate that it's not 2 weeks later. You actually did sit, even if only 1 minute of that felt like a sit. It's still something to celebrate that you arrived and you committed to that. And then just do it in small ways. Maybe finding we have a Monday midday Dharma at noon that you can join, and there's lots of different groups that you can join. Sometimes when you make that commitment, it can help establish that practice. And even just if you do 5 minutes, just starting really small and tangible. When the anxiety feels too much, just starting with something that feels like a simple commitment. And sometimes 5 minutes ends up feeling like, oh, I could sit longer. I can make it 10. But don't set it up for 10, because maybe if it was set up for 10, you might not show up. Start playing around with it a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Ali.
Hi.
Great.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. Actually, the reason I came on, I'll share about Dharma Buddha Sangha, is just basically to thank you, since you mentioned you were a nurse. So a deep, deep bow of appreciation to you and that profession, because it just still brings tears into my eyes, knowing at the first, as you were talking about the beginning of the pandemic, I remember they were broadcasting something from New York City that folks are coming out at 8 o'clock at their time and banging their spoons to the pots, just thanking the nurses.
Yeah.
And the police was just like kind of escorting the nurses to the hospitals so that they get there on time. So So just deep bow of gratitude and thank you. I think I am, in debt for all the nurses, and thank you for 2 years, especially with all the services and this too. So I don't know if that was the heart was all, that was all three of them included in the heart. So the Dharma Buddha Sangha. But breaking it down, Dharma, I mean, I'm finding it and I'm losing it, I mean, I just go in and out of the truth of how things are for me anyway. It changes somehow, Michelle was alluding to also. And then the Buddha, I'm more in touch with the, I came to the practice because of the wisdom part. And then, but now I came here and I know, the beginning of the wisdom is turning into a heart. But my heart made me come out, and just under the video and just thank you, because as soon as I heard you were a nurse, I just needed to come out and just give you a deep bow for that. For the Sangha part, I'm from Middle East. It's different. I was originally from Middle East. I was born there. So it's different. The Sangha, you have to come here and then make appointments and time. And it's practiced differently in other parts of the world. And I'm not sure if this, the 2,600 years ago when the Buddha had put that in, what was his intention of Sangha? It's 2,600 years here in the West. It has come to the West, and it is kind of like adopted to this, whatever Sangha means in here, being an individualistic society. You can't just go out, ask for things from the neighbors. You just, people live 10 years next to another person. They don't even know who they are. But anyway, I was just wondering the transition of what Sangha probably meant to Buddha when he put it in, and then how everything gets changed when it goes to a different culture, meets a different culture. And here we are, 2,600 years later, in the West, practicing the Sangha part of it. But just for your reflection on that. But again, I started with the heart. I just do a deep bow to you again as a nurse.
Yeah.
And thank you for your heart shared teaching.
Yeah, beautiful. I really appreciate you bringing in the American culture of the individualist, because that is what we're told, to get ahead and to be successful and to, always improve upon yourself, this constant self-improvement project. And it's very different in Buddhist Asian countries, and where the Sangha is, it's not like a Sunday 6 p.m. Zoom session for Sangha. It's embedded in the community. It's fully supported. And it doesn't have to be limited to that here. I mean, Nina mentioned the caring committee, right? So that's also part of Sangha. There are people here who've developed friendships in Sangha. When we were meeting in person, people would get a ride from each other and, could you give me a ride home? And, there's ways that we can still show up for each other outside of our little, 90-minute Zoom session. So, but really, thank you for your sharing there, Ali. Yeah.
I can't bow enough to you, so the last one.
Okay, you're cut off. You're cut off. No more bowing at me. Okay, thank you. Amy, you could go ahead and unmute there.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I have never spoken in this Sangha, and I'm relatively new. I started coming in January, and I've been coming most weeks since I came. And it's also when I started a few other Sanghas, mostly recovery-based Sanghas, because I've finally been letting go of my very unskillful refuges in cannabis addiction, which has been a long, so that's pretty new. And I've for a long time, I've sort of been a dabbler with a practice, and I haven't come to establish a regular one until really the last few months that I can and part of it was joining sanghas, which really has allowed me to, like, really helped me become a regular meditator. And that was like the step I'd been missing, I think. But I guess I just wanted to express my appreciation and sort of share my story with this Sangha, because I'm really getting so much out of Sangha and Dharma and the Buddha. And a lot of what brought me to really commit here is I lost my partner in November of 2020. He passed away suddenly. And that experience changed me, and has, I guess, as you were speaking to it, I don't know, it brought me to Buddhism more deeply, but it also I don't know, I guess what I want to say. I'm not sure.
Take your time.
The intense suffering of that experience. I guess in some ways it's just, I'm grateful that it did bring me to recovery and to Buddhism. And so there's something that's been really beautiful about that, and it's been the most intensely painful thing I've ever experienced. But it also, the grief process also really, like, something I've known for a long time is about the impermanence of emotions, but grief is like such an amazing teacher when it comes to that, because there's such a visceral experience of like, I'm in unbearable pain, but if I just allow it and be with it, like, I know I'll get a break. And I know, and then there was this knowing that if I do that, I'll get through this. Not that I always knew that, but it has been somewhat true in the sense that about it. So now it's almost a year and a half, and I'm just, finding some really solace in Sangha and Dharma and Buddha. And I just wanted to say, I just wanted to share all that and just share my appreciation. I've been getting a lot out of coming here. So yeah, I just thought I would finally talk. But yeah, thank you, everybody.
Amy, thank you so much for putting your voice in the room. There's so much wisdom in what you just shared. And for so many people, we find ourselves in the Dharma through suffering, whether it's usually not an invitation that we want. Usually we want to just be cruising along in our happy place and, not needing to wake up. But suffering is our great teacher. And, death and loss is one of those great teachers. And, grief can be so overbearing and feel oppressive, and it doesn't feel like it's going to come to an end. So really appreciating you sharing the impermanence of emotion, because when you're in the thick of it, it doesn't feel like it's going to let up, and it doesn't necessarily go away, but it lightens up and it changes, and we find a way to open up to it and to turn into difficulty and create some space around it. And yeah, really beautiful. I'm so happy you're part of our Sangha. Please keep coming. We feel we're lucky to have you, Amy. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Who else? It's an act of generosity to put your voice in the room. It's a way to build our Sangha. might feel a little scary. Oh, there's Paul. Go ahead and unmute Paul.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you. It's always delightful to see you, Eileen. Thank you for your talk this evening. I found particularly at the beginning of COVID that I was drinking a lot more than I usually do. And, I even in talking about it, I'm like, well, but not really that much. Just drinking more wine with dinner. I mean, that was really what it was. And I began to see that it was a way for me to buffer, a way for me to step back. And I think right now, when we talk about the 3 refuges, what's really the area of practice that's central to me right now is the Dhamma, just being with things just as they are, the truth of how things are.
Mhm.
And a lot of that right now is about, as you mentioned a couple of times, just bearing witness, just being present, allowing my heart to break, because that's what hearts do.
Mhm.
We have great literature for hundreds of years talking about breaking hearts, and yet we think, no, not me. So just allowing my heart to break.
Mhm.
And part of that too is also like really coming up against my conditioning as a white man, that I'm supposed to somehow know what to do. I'm supposed to solve it. So I'm supposed to have some answers to it. And that's great if I do. And it seems like an enormous act of generosity just to be present with it, just to hold it, just to be a witness.
Mhm.
So that's how I've been practicing with this for the last couple of years with COVID.
Mm. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to bear witness without fixing. When there's suffering, especially suffering that we can, that's a little more tangible for us to work with. Like it's like letting the person get their own tissue instead of getting the tissue for them. They're in some way, when you want to get rid of the suffering for someone else, it's a little bit of an aversion of I don't want to witness your suffering versus being with them in their suffering. So I appreciate you sharing that bearing witness component.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
I just wanted to put my sort of voice of gratitude out there too. It's been about a month since I refound Sangha after having a kid. So, the pandemic for me has been like, deep in on family, and having a 2-year-old at the time, and trying to keep my practice alive with like my clinical practice or my work. And it's just been really exhausting, and I'm feeling just so much gratitude, and my heart feels so full to see familiar faces and faces from different places in this Sangha on the computer. Yeah, and I'm also just finding my way back to the Dharma, and I think in some way to my own personhood, because I feel like as a mama, you kind of lose yourself and get a little destroyed, and then kind of put the pieces back together, and heart full of love all the while, but really an intense journey. So just wanted to put my voice out there and just say it's so nice to see so many familiar faces, and gratitude for everyone's practice.
Yeah, beautiful. It's really beautiful to see you too, Erica. See your baby.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we'll end on that. All this love in the room of our Sangha. Can't really top that one. So maybe just take a few moments and feel into your heart here. Breathe in. Breathing into resting in the Sangha, resting in all that's been shared of the teachings through the Sangha. And resting in the Buddha within yourself, the Buddha within those that you've seen here tonight, that we all have that quality to awaken. And may our time together be for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy and peaceful. May all beings be strong and healthy. May all beings be free from inner and outer harm. May all beings live with ease. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to unmute and say hello and goodbye together there.
Thank you for listening. To learn how you can support the teachers and Dharma Seed, please visit dharmaseed.org/donate.